Connecting with Pets, a Forever Vets podcast.
Welcome back to podcast episode number 14 of our season 2 of the Connecting with Pets Forever Vets podcast. Today we are talking about positive relationship with pets. My name is Shelly and we have Sammy, who is a receptionist from our Mirabella location. Welcome, Sammy.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Of course, thank you for being here today. So before we jump into all the great questions that we have in the topic about positive relationship with pets, give us a little introduction of yourself. Where you work now, what's your role, a little behind the scenes.
Yeah, so currently I work at our Mirabella location. I've been there since October, so I was very, very excited. It was a little bit of a career change for me. Currently I'm in reception, but I'm going to start cross-training as a tech as well.
That's exciting.
So it's exciting to see the different components of everything. It's been really nice to meet new people. We have some really, really awesome clients.
Oh, I love to hear that.
Yeah.
So overall, how long have you worked with animals, would you say?
Oh, goodness. It's probably been since I was 16, actually working with animals. I was very, very lucky that I got to go to an agricultural school, so I got to work with, it was really awesome. Some horses, fish, tilapia, koi, and then some birds as well. We also had different livestock there. We had cows and pigs. So,
what was your favorite?
I love pigs. I love pigs. And we actually had a vet clinic right in our school, so we got to learn a little bit more about that. So I got to see surgeries and stuff. And then I was very, very lucky from a young age that I knew that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to work with animals. Our dog, when I was little, taught me how to walk, and I wanted to be a mermaid and live in the ocean. But
who doesn't want to be a mermaid? I still want to be a mermaid.
Yeah, so that's kind of what drove my career path. So I went to college at a place called EKU, Eastern Kentucky, and they had just started a program called Animal Studies, which was the study of human and animal interaction and relationships. Okay. So while I was in school, I got to learn about primate behavior, elephant behavior, and finally dolphin behavior. So I did a study abroad with the Dolphin Communication Project, which was really, really fun in the Bahamas. Yeah.
How long were you there?
In the Bahamas, I was there 3 weeks. So we got to go out on a boat every day and swim with wild dolphins and record data. And it was, twist my arm, right? It was the worst. But actually, it was so fun. And then from there, I always knew I wanted to work with dolphins. So I took that experience and applied to internships. And then I moved to Bermuda for about 6 months and worked with a facility called Dolphin Quest in their training department. And then when I moved back to the States, I moved back to Kentucky and was like, this is not the move. Okay. So I moved to Florida and I worked at a place called Marineland Dolphin Adventure in every department till I was moved to the dolphin department.
Oh, wow. So you've been around animals.
Yes.
For quite some time, and I would say you have a really unique background, and the traveling and
I've been very, very blessed.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's been so fun, and I've been so lucky that I've gotten to work with so many different species across, since I was 16 years old. So I've been very, very lucky, and I consider myself very blessed to work with so many different animals and have different relationships with all of them. And
I know you said the last job that you had before you came to Forever Vets was with dolphins.
Yes.
What was your favorite thing working with dolphins?
Oh, there's so many. I think building the relationship with the animals, it's something that I had worked my whole life to do. And dolphins are very, very smart. I'm sure everybody knows. So building a relationship with them is something you really, really have to earn. So you're there Christmas, Thanksgiving, you're there in the morning at 6 a.m. doing their diet prep. You're there to the end of the night. You're constantly on call, and you're working and you're building those relationships with them. And then it's really, really special because you get to share that with other people. Yeah. So you get to share what you worked so hard to do with the public and have them build a connection to something so special, because dolphins out in the ocean, they're only living to be 11 to 13, and that's because of us. That's because of human impacts and what we do to our environment. So having them build that relationship and something more personal with that animal, that's a piece of comfort of conservation that they get to take home with them and put a face to conservation. And also you're a part of somebody's bucket list, the thing they want to do their whole life, and you're the person that gets to do that for them and with them. So that was really, really special, and I feel very honored that I got to do that in my lifetime.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Moving on to our next question. Overall, I know this is kind of hard to answer. You kind of did it a little bit at the beginning, but why do you love to work with animals? Like, what made you stay in this career path?
Animals always been a big part of my life. It's always been the center of what I wanted to do. I feel lucky that that's always what I wanted to do. But it's hard to decide which direction to go with. But I've always had a really big fascination with animal behavior and animal intelligence. That's probably what stole me to the way of dolphins. Is when you think about intelligence, you think about dolphins, but many species measure intelligence in lots of different ways. It's something that we talk about being anthropomorphic a lot, is that we always want to apply our human emotions to animals, but different animals show that intelligence in different ways. I don't think dogs are any less smart than dolphins. And having those relationships and that communication is really fascinating because we don't speak the same language. I don't speak dog. Dogs, we teach dogs to speak English, which when you think about it is crazy that we can't speak dog, but they can understand us. And I just think that whole depth of that conversation is never ending, and you're always learning stuff from that. And that can carry into, if we understand them, if we have these interesting communications with them, then how we can help them. If the dolphins were active participants in their own healthcare, which they did voluntary ultrasounds, voluntary bloods, they were trained to do those behaviors to have them be participants in their own healthcare. And I think it's interesting that we could hopefully maybe carry that on to our relationships with our pets.
Yeah, that's a great segue into the next question that I have is, like you said, you brought up the intelligence with the dolphin and understanding that and kind of feeling, good once you accomplish a new goal. But now going back to, pets that are being brought to Forever Vets, how can we practice overall positive relationships, whether it's a cat or a dog or an exotic animal, or anything along the lines of that?
I think there's so many things that we can do. I think the biggest thing is always going to be trust. You always want to build trust with your animal. If they know what's coming, then you're going to have an easier relationship with getting them into those things. So I think the link that we have with those animals is trust. When we go home, our pet trusts us that we're going to feed them, we're going to take them out. A lot of people have my dog sleeps in the bed with me like a baby. So we have that trust. If you go into a different room, your dog's going to look for you because they trust you and your ownership. So I think having that trust kind of carry over to outside of the home could really do a lot of help. So I think ways that we can start to have that positive relationship with our pets, and I always like to use the term setting them up for success, is practice those things at home.
Yeah, it's great.
If you're home, I have a dog that is very, very, very cute, but I had a feeling she was going to be a little more reactive at the vet. So at home, we started practicing restraints. So that wasn't the first time that she saw, being handled, maybe for a vaccine, that she understood what was coming. Yep. So we would practice, she would sit and lick peanut butter while I would hold her, and my roommate would poke her with her fingernail, and then she got lots of treats and lots of celebrating.
Okay.
So she's not only seeing that at home, but she's going to see that in the clinic. So it's not as scary seeing it in a different environment. We also did things where we would bring her into the clinic, she'd get lots of treats, and then she'd get to leave.
Yeah, we talked about those in our Fear Free episode. We call them happy visits.
Exactly.
They come there, get a treat, get a little scratch. This is not a scary place. We're here.
Exactly.
We're your friends.
And if you think about it, if you're taking your dog to the vet, 9 times out of 10 they're getting a treat, and the one time that they're getting some kind of service, then their reinforcement history with the vet is way more positive than it is negative.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you can even do my mom, she's got a little bit more of a reactive dog, so when we work the muzzle, when we go out, if she's going to the vet, that's the only time she gets hot dogs.
She knows it's hot dog day.
Yeah, so she's getting something with a really high reinforcement value when she's doing something more difficult, which would make sense. So she's going to have a more positive relationship with those things. And you can even turn that reinforcement. It doesn't always have to be food. If you have an anxious dog that, doesn't want to eat when they go to the visit, then they can come in, and their reinforcement is they get to leave.
Yeah.
So that's the more reinforcing thing to them, is that they get to leave.
They're starting to understand those patterns and those reinforcements and things like that.
Because if the only time they're coming is if when something, negative in their mind is going to happen, then obviously they're going to build up that anxiety. And you could even, like, if the only time you take your dog in the car is to the vet, work them up to going to the car. Or practicing, you can always ask your doctor or your tech, like, when you do the blood draw, do you swipe with alcohol before? That's something you can practice at home, because it's not going to be the first time that they're seeing that. And it's giving small approximations and kind of setting them up to that routine that's going to help them be a little less anxious.
That's a great point. Do you have any advice? I know you brought up some for the dogs, but I've heard a lot of complaints or difficulties, me being myself as a complaint, of getting a cat into a cat carrier.
Yes.
They see that cat carrier and they're like, I don't know where you're taking me, but I know it's a place I don't want to go.
Exactly.
And they run from me.
Oh, yeah. And my cat is very, very similar. She hates the carrier. And she's a good reason to. Like, I totally understand. Mm-hmm. So sometimes if, like, I know she's going to have a routine check to the vet, or if we traveled, we moved from Kentucky to Florida, for a year, she only ate in the carrier.
That's
she only ate in the
food.
carrier.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And so that worked really, really well for her. So she didn't see the carrier as something as scary, or as, this means that this is what's going to happen to me. Of course, she still gets worked up, but it's going to help decline that a little bit. If, like, I know she's going to go on Sunday, I have that carrier out on Monday. So it's not just me pulling it out of the closet and then dragging her from, underneath the bed. Obviously, things happen. Sometimes you have to take them to the vet unexpectedly. But if you're practicing that preemptively, when it does happen, it may not be as bad.
No, that's a great point. So those are great examples, regardless if you have a cat or a dog. Are there any additional steps that we can take as pet owners to practice a positive relationship other than just, I guess, going to the vet? It could be, I know, for example, my dog is very anxious in public settings, regardless if it's a park or at the beach or just walking in our neighborhood. Is there any advice for, working on positive relationships and kind of not pointing out their flaws with the things they need to work on, but things that we can do better to help them become more comfortable? Yeah,
so I think a big thing is routine. Like, my dog knows, okay, if I'm grabbing, like, if I go to see my boyfriend, we get the dog bed, we get the backpack. She knows that routine. So she knows, and she's the opposite. She's like, yes! But I have one other dog who gets a little anxious. So sometimes just grabbing those things, stopping, and reinforcing them. Like, get a treat and practicing it. Not every time, like we said, it's the same thing as the vet. Not every time you do those things, maybe don't put them in the car. Maybe reinforce them by not putting them in the car. Or if you're working on taking them places and them being less anxious, work on building up your duration. So you know your dog better than anybody else. You know when they're uncomfortable. You know when they're striving off of their baseline. But another thing that people don't think about is they know us too. So if we're anxious, I had a dog that was super reactive, and I used to get anxious when I was going, and I'm sure she's picking up on that. So thinking about how you can center yourself and not do things a little bit out of the normal when you're getting worked up to take them. So if you take them to the beach, maybe take them for 5 minutes, take them home, because that reinforcement is taking them home. And then maybe build it up to 10 minutes. And again, like, having those things that, like, you only get hot dogs when we're out and when you're calm, and then we get to leave. Piggybacking on that question, for any pet parents that have really anxious pets, what else couldn't they do? I know routine is probably really good for them. I think there's so many things. I think the biggest thing, and I encourage everybody to do this, is advocate for your pet. I think people that have more reactive dogs, more anxious pets, they get nervous about maybe what we'll think of them, or, their dog's anxious, so they're anxious, but you know your animal more than anybody else. If you're worried that your dog is reactive in the lobby, call ahead. There's no problem with that. It's not a burden on anybody. If you're here for a tech appointment and your dog does better in a room or with somebody coming up to the front, advocate for those things. You're your dog's voice. You're their you're the one that knows them more than anybody else. So there's nothing wrong with you having that voice for them. I think one thing I noticed so much in the clinic is that there's so many dogs who are scared to get on the scale. They come in and it starts the whole visit off with someone having to push them and put them on that scale. And if you think about it, that's setting their tone for the rest of the time. That's the first thing they do when they come in the building, is if they're scared to get on that scale, like, they're getting forced into something they don't want to do. So maybe have practiced those happy visits. You know, a lot of places, our office especially, has a surgery block from 12 to 3 where no one's in there. You can come in and work on your dog getting on that scale voluntarily. That can be trained in like 5 minutes.
That's a great option. So
yeah.
call ahead, regardless if it's Mirabella or a different location.
Yeah, and a lot of those locations have that surgery block. And then just that small little thing, you're changing the whole tone of that visit for the next time they come in. So instead of them starting off on something like, oh, this makes me nervous, and somebody's putting me on here, I'm uncomfortable, and now I'm going to go into a room that I don't know, that's going to change the whole vibe of when they're there, is if they're doing something more comfortable. So I think, you know, the more they see something, we call it descents in training, the less scary it is. So like we talked about, like the carrier, I bring the carrier out. If I'm only bringing that out once, it's a new stimulus for the animal. If you're bringing it out multiple times, it's less scary. There are descents to it. So that descents and that routine is going to be what is going to help with that anxiety. And always asking, I have in my notes here, I talked about, there's a really, really great book called Don't Shoot the Dog that talks about positive reinforcement in any aspect of your life. You can use it on your kids, your husband, your dog, your cat. Okay. But it's a really great tool. I think a lot of people in the training world could use it. That just talks about how you can advocate and move things along with behavior modification. So I think taking the steps you need to take before you get there and making a plan and advocating for your animal can go a long way. That's
the most important thing that we've gotten out of this. And again, you brought up, you know, coming from Kentucky to Florida.
Yep.
With that experience in hand, how was that traveling with your cat?
It was definitely the thing I was the most stressed about with the whole move, which sounds silly because you're uprooting your whole life. So it was stressful. Luckily at the time I worked at PetSmart, so I thought about my plan. I was around different products. So I got her, we traveled in a soft-sided carrier.
Okay.
And as soon as I made the decision to move, I bought it. I put it out. She had a bed in there. She had her food in there, and we practiced. So she would go in that carrier. Sometimes I'd feed her in there and I'd zip it up.
There you go, folks. You gotta
practice. I'd zip it up, and then sometimes she'd go in there, I zip it up, and I move it a little bit. So it's not this, you know, this new thing that, okay, here one day I'm going to put you in here and we're going to be in the car for 12 hours. Yeah, she was still anxious, but I think it made a really, really big difference with practicing it, and it wasn't new to her. It was a new thing in the movement of the car and everything, but that carrier was the one thing she knew for 6 months. Versus, and then when we got to the place that we were going, she sat in that carrier for 2 days because she was like, this is my safe space.
This is my area.
I know this space.
No, that's great to bring up regardless if you're going to the vet, if you're traveling across the state, if you're just going to the park. Advocate for your pet. You understand your pet the most, and practice. Practice makes perfect, and there's always room for continuing that positive relationship.
Yeah,
with your
and it
pet.
makes you less anxious.
It does.
Which is also very, very important. We all love our animals and everything, but it's important that we're taking care of ourselves, and those things are going to help us to be less anxious when we're in more stressful situations.
No, I completely agree. So at Forever Vets, we have a mission statement, and a part of that mission statement, it states strengthening the human-animal bond. What does that mean to you?
I think this is like one of the most important questions, because this is the thing that kind of, obviously I made a career change, and the bond is important to me, and seeing that and what that represents in this company was a big green flag that I liked a lot, because that bond, it means everything. Our pets are our family. It sounds so cheesy, but it's so true. Like when I leave the house, I miss my dog. When I go to bed, I'm looking for my cat and my dog. My cat was with me when I lost my dad. So they're milestones for these big events in our lives that we don't even think about. So I think that bond is so, so special that we get to share that with them, and we don't even speak the same language. Like they're a part of our family, and we just understand each other in a way that's emotional and from passion and love, and that's something that's so great that we share that with them, and we're their whole lives when you think about it. And I just think and they trust us with that, and I just think that's so special with any species and any animal that you have a relationship with. But you know, when you think about it, you start your day with your dog and your cat, and you end it with your pets. And I just watched a horror movie last night, and the whole time I was like, where's the dog?
Yeah, like, I need to go to the bathroom. The dog has to come with me.
I was like, where is the dog? And that's a common thing that people have. We have a drive and a passion, and, we have a compassion for these animals that sadly sometimes I don't always have with people. But I just think that's so special that we can have those relationships with something that doesn't even speak the same language that we do.
No, that you so well put, honestly. And to piggyback on the mission statement that we just talked about, at Forever Vets, being a receptionist and now transitioning into that vet tech role, how do you do that for clients? How do you put that statement like into the physical world,
Yeah, and even as a receptionist, you're the first person they're coming in to see. So sometimes people come in and they're stressed, and that's because they love their pet and they love, them, and maybe something's going on. Maybe they're not themselves, they're not their baseline. So I think it's really important to also take care of the people when they come in, because if that person may have stayed up all night with their dog throwing up, maybe no one's taking care of them. And if they can't recharge themselves, then they can't be present for their pet. So sometimes I think it's nice to we put them in rooms, we ask them if they need anything, but sometimes like they just want someone to bring them a cup of coffee or a water, or do you need me to call someone for you? Because they're so worried about those animals, which it's so, in a way, great to see how much people care about their pets, but also who's taking care of these people when they're stressed. So even in that reception role, I think it's really, I don't want to say special, but it's really like almost intimate to share that with people and know like, okay, you're here, this is what I can do for you. Even if it's a difficult day, it's a difficult morning, like let me do something that's going to help you, because I know you're trying to help your baby right now.
Yeah, it's you start to remember those people, not only the people but the pets that are coming in. You start to build that relationship and not only watch like the pet grow up, but
exactly
continuing on that relationship with the person as well.
Yeah, and it's compassion. I think it shows a lot. What we feel for animals, we also need to carry on for people. I think it's really important right now is having compassion for people that are really, really stressed out. And maybe that could make a difference in their whole day, is someone just saying like, hey, I see you. I understand like what's going on. So what can I do for you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you have done a fabulous job answering all these questions so far, and I think we've learned a lot about positive relationship with pets and how we can continue to be the best pet parents that we can be. I want to open the floor to you once more if there's any last minute things that we did not get to that you want to leave for our listeners.
I would say the biggest thing is if you don't know where to start, I think the hardest time is starting a new habit or a new routine and like maybe feeling overwhelmed with a lot of information. I shouted out a book earlier. It's very, very popular, even in the dolphin training world. It was called Don't Shoot the Dog, which is all about positive reinforcement and behavior, and that's by Karen Pryor. She's actually the person that came up with clicker training and positive reinforcement.
Wow.
Yeah, so she is she actually just passed this year, but she's a great writer. There's also Lost the Podcast if you're like an audiobook person or you like to listen in the car. There's a good podcast about it. It is an audiobook. And then there's another book. It's ironically, both these are written by women, so shout out to Women History Month. But
there you go.
The Power of Positive Dog Training is another really, really great one. It's by Pat Miller. So I think just if you're unsure where to start, just do a little bit of research. I think you'll find out that it's easier to start and build those behavior patterns than you might think.
No, I think that's awesome. And again, thank you again for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And again, for our listeners, this is podcast episode number 14 from our season 2 of the Connecting with Pets Forever Vets podcast. Today we talked about positive relationship with pets. It was a great time, and we can't wait for our next episode next week. See you then.
Thanks everyone for listening. We are Forever Vets, locally owned and operated in Jacksonville, Florida. Visit us at forevervets.com to find out more about our community events, monthly promotions, and more specifics on animal care. Don't forget to catch our episode next week.